Yeah, he was out there. The guy.
Well, you're.
Yeah, welcome, everyone. Yeah, welcome. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming out. As we get started, folks, thank you very much. Welcome. We got a full house. Really appreciate everybody coming out. I will ask if you have things. The folks sitting next to you, we have plenty of space outside, but it will definitely interfere with the movement of the meeting and the recording. And also, I'm sure lots of people came to provide comments and feedback. So before you do speak, just please say your name for the record and the minute taker who's going to be doing it from the recording this evening. All right. So as we get started, first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from July 1st, both regular and non-public sessions.
I thought they looked good, and I move that we accept them as presented.
Seconds.
I agree with John's comments.
Are there any comments or corrections? No? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. All right, board reports. John, let's start with
I have nothing to report.
Tracy.
Energy Committee is working on some things, did announce a successful move by New Hampshire Community Power. That the rates have remained very stable and well below the market rates for our provider. They're also working on some ideas for newer communication for some of the energy ideas which are being developed.
Okay.
Conservation Commission will meet this Thursday right here at 7 p.m.
I have nothing to report either, but can we grab a couple of those chairs? We got more folks coming in. Can someone be able to bring in a couple of them? Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Moving on, town manager's report.
Yes, thank you. At the last meeting, I reported that we were at full staff. Since then, we've had 2 resignations in the staff. Dave Harper retired from a part-time position at the transfer station. We were fortunate to receive a very good applicant and have filled that position. So the applicant will be starting, I believe, sometime this week. So nice to get a quick turnaround on that. And then Rick Argent has resigned from the grounds crew leader position, leaving an open position on the grounds crew, which we plan to fill later this fall prior to the winter season. We are going to leave it open for a little while. The grass is slowing down on its growing. We think we have a good handle on that with some help from the DPW crew. So that'll help us out a little bit budget wise, and it'll get us deeper in the year to transition seasons, which is a little easier time to fill those positions. We'll be looking at that in the next month or so, releasing that position or hiring someone on. The Whitney Hall and Public Safety Building projects are continuing to go well. Whitney Hall's making good progress. We're working towards a rough-in inspection on the library level this Friday. We did pass the rough-in inspection, and they've been doing sheetrock in the downstairs, and installation and windows are being placed in the addition area. So that project is continuing to move forward and appears to be close to on time. So the public safety building is also doing well. They completed the pour of all the footings and frost walls, which they waterproof and insulated. This week, they're working on under slab utilities with a plan of finishing the slab by the middle to the end of August and going on to carpentry. mentioned the last meeting, Mascoma Lakeside Park is pretty much done. We're working on some final punch list items and final ADA requirements. I did meet with the engineers out there on site last week. We identified a few things that needed to be upgraded and fixed by the contractor, so we'll be talking with them and bringing it back. And I'd also like to thank DPW. They spent some time out there last week. They put in a lot better watering system with hose bibs along the park so we can keep those plants watered. They put the sign back in that needed to come down during construction. They moved the kiosk and made it ADA accessible, and then they also put some hard pack pads in for ADA accessible tables and benches. So just thank them for spending the time down there and doing that work. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, the Mascoma Lakeside Park Committee is planning a grand opening ceremony on October 5th at 2 p.m. for Mascoma Lakeside Park. So with that, in the planning department, we did get served that there was an appeal filed in the Superior Court as a response to the ZBA variance for Laramie Farms. So I'll be working with Rob Taylor and our attorney to work through that appeals process. And then, last week we had a site plan for a brewery downtown in the old laundromat building that was approved by the planning board. So that'll be a project that continues to move forward. You know, there's multiple steps in getting a new business up and off the ground, but the site plan was approved last week. DPW update, you guys may have seen it, but DPW staff has been really busy finishing the sidewalk repairs on Main Street and High Street. They did a little bit along Main Street, Lakeside Park. That was kind of a trial run and we went over the old sidewalk. So that one's a little bumpy, but if you look at Main Street in the Whitney Hall area and High Street, they did a very nice job replacing those sidewalks in-house. So they're going to be continuing to do that. The next on the docket are sidewalks near Shaker Hill. And then the sidewalks along US Route 4 by EVS. So I'd like to, again, thank them for putting in the effort to create their own sidewalk machine and doing this work instead of hiring it out. And as we get near the end of this project, I'll let you know the numbers of, I don't want to say how much money we save, but how much more we got for the money that we put forward. And they're doing really good things there. The enhanced crosswalk device at EVS has been installed. They've ordered a couple ahead signs that they need to put on those, but for the most part, those signs are in and working. Steve Mazinski, one of our new hires in the water department, upgraded his water license by passing both the level 1 water treatment and level 1 water distribution license test. So we'd like to congratulate Steve for that upgrade in his license. The phase 2, this is pretty substantial. The phase 2 water pre-application that we turned in to the SRF program ranked number 10 out of 104 projects. So as we move that forward, if we decide to take that to town meeting, it looks like there's a really good chance that we'd get funded under the state SRF program, which is an extremely low interest loan program. And as you guys saw from before, it offers up grant opportunities and principal forgiveness as well, which really reduces the overall cost of these projects. So we were happy to see that we ranked so high in the process and we'll look forward to possibly moving a new water project onto the books. And then I just wanted to let everybody know, Chantel, the administrative secretary here in the DPW office, had her baby on Saturday. She had a healthy baby girl and mom and baby are doing good. That's my report. Yes, sir.
I have a question. A number of people have asked me about the large trailer parked in front of Whitney Hall with
Yeah.
the bump out pulled out. Is somebody living there?
No, somebody's working on it and the police have been working with them to look at it and keep the project moving forward so they can get it out of there.
But my understanding is it's actually parked on the private property, which is part of that parcel.
Parked kind of on the street.
Got
Yeah.
out to the street. Yeah.
About that much.
Yeah.
We're on target, however, to stripe EVS crosswalks before the beginning of school, before the 27th.
We should be, yeah.
I know I had asked in the past, just in general about the parking on the Main Street side of Lakeside Park. I came upon it and it had previously been reported to me several times that people were parking on our brand new sidewalk. And so I called it into dispatch. But I think as, you know, citizens, if you see somebody parking on a sidewalk, you know, it's there for ADA accessibility and for people who use not to park on. So if you see something, please say something, because our guys put a lot of time and effort into that paving. We just got it done and it's gonna ruin it.
When the state paves Main Street, will they be putting gravel on the side of the new
Probably.
paving? So we'll have to return to that section of Main Street to do the graveling ourselves next to the sidewalk after they pave.
Oh, we're gonna gravel a large part. They'll probably do some shoulder gravel along there, but not between.
They're not gonna fill in that large area so that people could have a place to park, for example.
No, we'll look at it as it.
Fire. A firefighter was treated for an injury. The right process helped the displaced people.
Police say a man who was arrested after running from police and
Got it. I'm so sorry. I
All right.
couldn't.
Any other questions for Ed from the board?
No.
Any questions from the public for Ed at this point? All right. We will move on to the business of the evening, starting with the reassessment update. Ed, would you like to give us an update? I know the reassessment cards went out today.
Yeah, the reassessment, the reevaluation cards went out today. We asked Norm to come in to talk to you guys a little bit about that. I'll let him do that and I can update if needed. I did there was a letter that Norm and the assessing department put in with each one, kind of explaining what's happening. I put out a little note on listserv today and Facebook. I'll go ahead and let Norm talk about the numbers and what's going on, and if he needs further updates after that, we can do that.
And just for clarity, for people who may not know, Norm, I forget the name of the assessment company you work for. But Norm is the assessor that the town hires. What's it?
Yeah, it's me.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
And,
Yeah.
first of all, my name's Norm Bernache. I've been doing Enfield for almost 35 years now. I do have to say that the people in Enfield, it's probably the most enjoyable place that I've worked with the people in Enfield. Just the citizens and taxpayers, they're, always, good to see. But with that said, we're mandated every 5 years to do a revaluation by the state constitution. We've had record, increases in property values and sales over the last, it happened really, COVID, we'll call it COVID prices, but it continues to spiral. Well, we're hoping it ends, because doesn't always seem to be a lot of rhyme or reason to, the market. It's very imperfect. Usually if the market increases a little at a time, there's some checks and balances there. But over the last 3 years, there hasn't been really any checks and balances, a lot of cash sales, no inspections, no bank appraisals, no bank lending, no home inspections, no appraisals. So it kind of makes it a little imperfect, a little harder to analyze. But our goals is to be close to 100%. We look at, first of all, we start with 2 years sales. And then we try to get our adjustments correct. And then we look at time being important, because the sales that happen in 22 to 23 would be appreciating up. And so we look at, then we zero it down to 23 to 24, April 1st, 23 to 24. So we had 79 sales that were valid sales during that time frame. And that's what we analyzed to get the assessment ratio up to 100%. We're actually, the analysis shows we're at 99% overall. The two other important statistics are the coefficient of dispersion, which is 9.1. Being under 10 is considered very good. An acceptable limit is 20. Just for a quick explanation, a coefficient of dispersion is the measure of fairness along the ratio. In other words, the closer zero, all assessments would equal the sale prices. So your line would be zero. The farther you go up above that line and below that line, your dispersion is higher. So 20 dispersion would have a lot of sales above and below what the median ratio is. So that's just the explanation of dispersion. And the other important statistic is price related differential. We're at 1. Over the last few years, we've been at approaching 105, 106, which means that high priced properties are assessed for less than low priced properties. In other words, the low priced properties were paying more than their fair share, so to speak, in terms of the assessment to sale price of any one year analysis of sales. What we've done is we've given you some charts on by neighborhood. And you can see all the different neighborhoods that we look at, specifically like Muskoma, Crystal, Spec Pond, and then different neighborhoods around town. The newer subdivisions are generally gonna have a higher sort of neighborhood factor. And you have to be cautionary when you look at this chart, because the less sales don't necessarily mean that you can't rely on statistics when you have few sales. So the more sales you have, the more robust or the better your data is. I included a little one by acreage to make sure that you're capturing small parcels versus large parcels. And we break it into, 0 to 5, half an acre, half acre to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 10, and more than 10. And then last one is the residentials, the multifamilies, the waterfront, the manufactured housing, and commercial industrials. Now, one of the things that's happened in the market is, since housing has gotten so expensive, is the low, just in order to have a place to call home, the low price properties had been had a lot more, or have a lot of demand. So for instance, condominiums and mobile homes have gone up more than the average assessment in the community, because more people can afford the lower priced homes. So there's more competition for those homes. Now I'll caution, and I think I've said it several times, do not use the old tax rate to calculate your taxes. The tax rate is gonna drop significantly. Probably in the, I'm guessing somewhere in going on a limb, but probably 16 to 17, somewhere in there, just based on the numbers. And that is if no one, if the town didn't spend any more money and the county didn't spend any more money and the school didn't spend any more money this year, I know that's not, but and your assessment changed more than 1.8 times, you would see an increase in your tax bill. So the total grand list, and based as it's sitting right now, went up 1.8 times. And that's not uncommon. I just talked to there was a revaluation in Cornish, which is actually south of Lebanon, but the values there went up 1.8 times, which when I talked to the assessor there, that was very interesting. But the math is a ratio in 23, which only had sales from 4/1/23 to 9/30/23, was indicating an assessment ratio of 56.8%, which the inverse of that, the factor to get to 100% for all property is 1.76. So that's the way the math works, because your 0.56 is less than 1. So the factor to get there is more than, the inverse of 56.8. So, and the total grand list taxable value is sitting now, after the initial analysis, at 1.8. When we look at the different groups, the condos on average, the median increase is 2.13 times. So they're gonna see the largest change in their, you know, the tax bill. Waterfront properties went up 1.89 times. Commercial industrial went up 1.46 times. That's not unusual. Commercial industrial property has a different economic driving force to it, so it doesn't appreciate the same as regular residential properties. Residential, non-waterfront and non-condo went up 1.67 times. So generally speaking, single-family homes are gonna see a slight reduction, everything else being equal. And I will caution, I would encourage people to call Julie, set up an appointment. We're doing mostly phone appointments. It's more efficient and convenient that way. We will follow up with folks. I look at that process as very informative. We gather a lot of information, and you'll see if there's any systemic problems. We're gonna make errors. That happens. There's a lot of data we're analyzing. There's a lot of properties. We expect that to happen. We will correct those errors, and we're really looking for systemic issues in our analysis to see the problems will rear their ugly head. And we will do all the intake of all the informal reviews and then make some judgments as to what we should do to correct those flaws in the analysis, and then send out new valuation notices to anyone that had changed. Or you don't necessarily have to have had a hearing, an informal review to have a change. If we find an issue in a neighborhood, and what we do is we don't just change that one person those three people that complained. We would change the whole neighborhood, and then let those people in the neighborhood know that their assessment has changed, and that could be up or down. You know, so sometimes we find that people will look at their neighbors or, you know, friends and say, look, you know, my house is, very similar to theirs and ours is, you know, higher. And it may be that in some cases, someone's, you know, we were underestimating that neighborhood. So it goes both ways. And, at the end of the process, there is the abatement review, which happens after the second half tax bill. And we'll know by usually October, have a pretty good idea what the rate's gonna be.
October, November.
Yeah, so we're shooting for finishing all the reviews and making any of the adjustments prior to September 1st, so we can submit to state reporting to get the tax rate set. So, and you know, if anyone, I've probably, there's gonna be some properties that, what we call bootstrapped, where they had an issue with them. They continue to have that issue, but when we update our tables and our values, our land values, our building values, those same problems may exist in some properties, and they kind of get bootstrapped up. And it's been my experience that I see the same folks, and, you know, we'll sit down and I know what your problem is, and, you know, you got bootstrapped. And that happens. That's a sort of a side effect of a revaluation.
And do you have anything else to add at this point?
No, I think it's just really important to reiterate that, you know, 1.8 is almost double an assessment. And, you know, when people get that property card, they need to realize that their taxes are not going to double. They're not gonna jump like that. It's, you know, there's many different pieces in the pie, and if your piece of that pie stays approximately the same with everybody else raising, then taxes will stay approximately the same. As he showed, you know, there's some different variables where some people's went up a little bit more than others. That'll change the equation a little bit, but just want people to know that, you know, property value went up a lot. That doesn't mean your tax bill's gonna go up a lot. We'll see where that actually falls October, November. but for the most part, like he said, overall, a lot of the residential will go down a little bit. Certain other sectors may go up a little bit, but we'll just have to see what happens with that. And we're really looking for, look at your property card when it comes in. If there's something that's not right on there, if it says you have 2 bathrooms, you have 1 bathroom, something like that, make sure to call the assessing department and we'll try to get those right and make the adjustments that are needed.
And the other thing that I would add is that when you get, say if you saw an increase in your taxes on the second half tax bill, don't take that second half payment and double it and think that's what your taxes are gonna be the following year. Because what that second bill is the makeup for the first bill. So they're making it all up on that second bill. So you have to take your total new bill, both payments, and divide it by 2. And looking forward, so your payments would be, semi-annual and it would be split in half that way. So don't, if you see even a 5% or 10% increase, say you're at 190 and the average is 180, don't take that new second half payment and double it because that's not accurate.
Other questions from the board?
You finished the assessments and I see they're all now posted to the town website. So people can look at their
Yes.
neighbors, et cetera, and
Right.
compare as needed. What do you feel is the relationship between a recent market sale and assessment? How do you explain that?
There's gonna be some variation. There's gonna be what we're shooting for is the median. And then we'd have to look at that recent sale and that may be some evidence to us. We try not to look at the stuff after 4/1. Because, a couple things could happen. The market could go down. We had that in the 90s from the crash of the late 80s, early 90s. When I think we did a revaluation in 1990 or right around that time, and then the market just went. So we were over 100%. So what we do also is I'm gonna look at the sales, the year following the revaluation are gonna tell also if there's any flaws in the modeling that I did. And then we can correct those. We'll either get abatements or we'll see a certain type of property or a certain size property or a certain neighborhood that seems to be trending where we're either high or low. So we can correct those, but I always say one sale doesn't make a market. Some people are better bargainers than others. Some people, will negotiate hard. Some people just want it and they're, and for whatever reason, they have the money and or they've been outbid. What happens in this market, there's been a lot of outbidding and people get tired of getting outbidded and, they're like, there's a lot of emotion there. So we, try to take the emotion out of the equation.
When a property is only partially built, you reassess at this point based on the percentage of completion. When do you come back, assuming it gets finished at some point in the next several months and assess the final?
We did all the new construction this spring as of it. So we tried to be there around April 1st. That's our date. And so we estimated the amount of completion at that point in time. I'm guessing with the new, no one worried about it. If we had it at 50% and it was only 40%, possibly say they're spending 500,000 on a new home and we got it at 250 and they only had 200 into it at that point. We can sit down and talk about that and adjust that amount of completion to accurately reflect what the records show and where the house was at as of April 1st of 24. We will go back next April and continue to do that work April of 25 to say, okay, is this house complete? Was it whatever was there, April 24, is it the same? You know, are there any new appendages to the building? You know, sometimes, you know, you'll have the basic house. Usually we can see ledger boards and things like that. We'll say, next year you need to, you know, check for decks or check for porches because they weren't built yet. Landscaping isn't in, many things. Sometimes, it's a cape and they only finish the first floor and, you know, don't finish the second floor. You know, saving it for a later date with the costs of, you know, building construction. It's a big nut to crack, so to speak.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board? Are there questions or comments from the public?
Bob Cusick, you have to, think too, because the school budget comes into this, so your final numbers are gonna be changing a little bit, won't it, from because the school budget has either they give money back or it costs more or whatever. So that doesn't completely tie in with how the budget is, in the town, right? Correct?
The total tax bill, right, is the sum of the school, the town, the county.
Right, the
Okay.
timing, I'm saying.
Oh, the timing, in terms of the correction of the second tax bill?
Right.
Yeah, I'm not, do you know the answer to that? I don't know the exact timing of when. each bill
I'm
comes in.
just saying there is a differential
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
you know, when the school is done, maybe some money comes back, so.
Yeah, there's quite a few
Yeah.
factors in
Yeah.
that last
Yeah.
bill,
Yeah.
so we won't really know what that is till the late October, November timeframe.
Right, there's, rooms and meals tax, there's a, you know, there's always discussion about that, how much the state's gonna give back and, yeah, so it is a combination of all those things. Our job, the assessor's job has nothing to do with how the budgets are set.
Right.
So we're just trying to, figure out how the pie is split among the different, you know, types of properties and all the variations that go into it. But, you know, if you have questions, if you see anything that's out of line, certainly get in touch with Julie and she'll, pass everything on to me.
It's also fair to note that the town does not operate on a July 1 fiscal year, that we're on a calendar year. And so it's important for folks to know that there is not a new budget from the town that takes effect July 1. We operate January through December.
Other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much, Norm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the explanation and all the hard work. All right. Second up tonight, the proposed septic regulation draft. Do you want to run through the changes in this draft?
Yeah, so in your packets, the second draft of the septic regulation, as asked at the last meeting, I added George Pond to the regulation and added the changes that cause expansion of a system, be it expansion of a house, added bedrooms, change of use, any of those things that, instead of just having a system designed, the system would need to be installed as well. And then I highlighted the penalty section as we've seen in other, policies that we've done, the fines and assessments that we wanna dictate. We can talk about those, but they're usually capped and set out by the state. So we need to talk with the attorney and see what actually is allowed there. So I don't think we really spend a lot of time talking about that. We can talk about whether we want to be on the high side, low side. But overall, once we get this to the attorney for review, that's where we can talk about the setting of that. And then when the final draft comes back, we can have that in there and have that discussion. With that, this is the new policy. I believe she's still online. Nisa was online from the Department of Environmental Services that was gonna just talk a little bit about the importance of having this regulation and the importance of taking care of our septics around the lake. Well, Nisa, are you there?
I am, yeah. Good evening, everybody. So my name is Nisa Marks. I'm the watershed coordinator at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. So I'm a general point of contact for lake associations and lake stakeholders across the state, and provide help for local stakeholders interested in taking action to to protect this resource. So just as an opening disclaimer, DES does not take a position on municipal ordinances. And so I'm here to provide information about how septic systems affect water quality, but not to formally take a position on the ordinance itself, as the state likes to allow municipalities to, do work at the local level. So with septic systems, from an environmental standpoint, we're concerned about two things. One is the flow of E. coli bacteria from the system into surface water, where it can make people sick. And then second is the flow of nutrients, particularly phosphorus, from the septic system into the lake, where it drives cyanobacteria blooms and weed growth. So cyanobacteria blooms can, threaten public health, affect property values, affect municipal revenues, affect tourism, all adverse effects. And, weed growth can impede the joy of swimming and boating and so forth. So that's why we focus on phosphorus when we're talking about lake health. A modern, well-maintained septic system does a pretty good job of removing both of those things, the bacteria and the phosphorus. Cesspools, holding tanks, and systems that aren't inspected and pumped regularly do not do that adequate job of containing the forms of pollution. So DES recommends that septic systems be inspected and pumped at least once every 3 years. This is a recommendation. There is no state requirement that that be done. Municipalities can elect to pass ordinances like the one under consideration to pass more protective measures for lake health. If we look at statewide data, the number one contributor of phosphorus pollution is stormwater runoff, so erosion, fertilizer use, things like that. But a lot of lakes cannot achieve their water quality goals without addressing septic issues. So we see many lakes where, half to 3/4 of septic systems in some cases are out of date or not properly maintained. We don't have data like this specific for Enfield lakes at this point in time. Mascoma Lake is currently working on developing a watershed-based plan, which will quantify the pollution sources, including what percentage of phosphorus is coming from septic systems. So we'll have data for Mascoma within the next year or so. And I'm happy to answer questions if there are any from the select board or the public. This is an issue that we are concerned about across the state. It is one of the contributors of pollution into our lakes that is driving, issues of concern for both public health and the environment.
And do you have anything else to add before we start discussing?
No, I think, that's right on target with what we talked about before we developed this, that, stormwater was the number one contributor, and we knew that. It was a little heavier lift, and we are definitely working on that, but we also thought the septic regulation was something that we could work on through this year.
Other questions or comments on the regulation from the board?
I'll save my comments for after the public.
Okay. I'll ask one question. To start with, are there resources on the DES site that we can point people to around the impacts that you just discussed?
We have data that describes this at the level of other lakes specific throughout the state that I could refer you to, and I am awaiting final approval on a fact sheet that will describe municipal ordinances that have been adopted by other municipalities across the state and how they relate to lake health. So I hope to have that posted within the next couple of weeks. I'd be happy to share the draft with you for distribution if you'd like.
That would be great. And if you could, if it's convenient, please forward those links or whatever to Ed, because those would be nice for people to review on the impacts on the other lakes, which are probably not that different from our lakes, given we're all pretty close to one another.
Certainly. This is also passing municipal ordinances is identified as a tool to combat cyanobacteria blooms in our statewide cyanobacteria strategy.
Okay. All right, questions or comments from the public? Again, I'll just remind folks, just say your name before speaking, but. Thanks.
Hi, John S. on Crystal Lake. Is that okay? Do any these to the board member? Copies, and I think you folks have seen my posting on Facebook. Had a chance to look at my comments on that?
Yep, yeah, I believe your letter's in the packet, the letter you sent.
Okay, did everybody get a chance to look at that? Folks?
Yes.
Yes, yeah,
Great,
reviewed it.
okay.
Thank you.
Second iteration. What I've come up with is quite a few questions for you regarding the septic rule, the proposed septic rule. And I've passed some of these out to the folks here. Any questions? Well, let's see what you got there. Good, yeah. Pass them around. I have a problem reading, so I've asked my wife to read the questions to you. And we've got, as you can see on that, there's 6 questions. We can go through them one at a time. Is it excellent question number 1?
I see that the New Hampshire RSA grants health officers, with the approval of the select board, the authority to adopt regulations that will ensure that wastewater disposal systems shall not be a nuisance or injurious to the public health. First of all, who is our health officer? And is he or she the author of this proposed rule?
Our health officer is also our building inspector. We just hired them from,
Vincent Tercey.
yeah, Vincent Tercey.
This was written during the gap, so I wrote it with the help of a few citizens from town. And then he has been weighing in on different aspects.
Okay. Second question?
Has anyone identified any nuisance or injury to the public health caused by any existing sewage disposal system on our lake?
We've had a significant increase in cyanobacteria blooms, and as we've heard from other folks and from the DES representative tonight, septics are a contributor to cyanobacteria blooms.
That's an interesting thought, but has anybody, any evidence that septic systems have contributed to cyanobacter bloom?
Yes, DES
Evidence.
is telling us that part of their strategy to deal with cyanobacteria blooms is septic systems, and they're basing that recommendation based on the data they've collected throughout New Hampshire.
Have you on this lake or Mascoma seen any evidence from septic systems that harm the lake?
I don't think I'm gonna be able to answer your question to your satisfaction.
Can I?
Answer it all.
I would say though,
Yeah.
in the past, when we've had a complaint about a septic system, the health officer goes and takes samples. So we have had instances since I've been on the board where we have taken samples.
Samples where,
Samples at the reported site. So I'm not gonna be able to list where it is off the top of my head.
okay.
If you need that, you could talk to the health officer or Ed.
Now, I guess my question, are the samples taken in the lake or at the septic system?
In the lake. The state comes out and takes a water sample from the lake itself.
We do
yeah.
have data from Crystal, Mascoma, and Spectacle that phosphorus levels are elevated in those 3 lakes. And I will say across the whole state, where we have data from over 200 lakes in the state, we don't have a single lake where we have identified septic as 0% of the problem.
Interesting. What I've seen from the sampling that's been done just recently in Crystal Lake, the major source of phosphorus is Bicknell Brook. Depending on the season of the year, we just have it from, what I've seen is from 2023. Early in the year, we were at a normal level of phosphorus. Around the time of the flood, we're at a real accelerated level, which is the state person mentioned, the runoff is the major contributor to that phosphorus. What I know about from my experience with septic systems and wastewater, hey, the phosphorus isn't removed very well in the septic system. It stays in the fluid, goes to the leach field, goes into the ground. But has that phosphorus reached the lake to the level that it causes harm? That's what I'm asking you folks. Otherwise, well, let's just stay with that.
Using the best data that we have, septic systems contribute to the phosphorus that enters the lakes, which contributes to cyanobacteria. And based on, and we're trying to address that problem. And as she said tonight, they have not found that you can address that problem without addressing septic systems. And then, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I would say, healthy, well-designed systems.
Yes.
It comes out and filters out, but if you have a bad system that's not working properly, introducing too much waste into the leach field pipes are cracked or something, you have groundwater coming through. All of us that live along the lake know there's a lot of water in the ground moving towards the lake. You get that in there and it's gonna be a highway to take that straight into the water.
Sure, I realize all that water eventually reaches the lake with some phosphorus in it. My question is the harm done to the lake. By the way, we swimmers sometimes don't go to the bathroom in our houses. Sometimes you go in the lake. That causes harm. No, it causes pollution in the lake, but really not harm to the lake. Do you agree with that?
I don't agree with that.
You know, okay.
Quite
What-
frankly, and
what
I
I-
would also like to
I
know,
think it's a false.
what
it's a false
exactly
question.
is your evidence about Bicknell Brook? That you can blame so much of this pollution on that brook? Are you a scientist, sir?
I'm an engineer.
An engineer.
An engineer.
Are you a water engineer?
I'm a wastewater treatment plant engineer. I know something about drinking water, but that's not my business. I've designed
I-
septic.
Well, and
And I
I will
made-
say, sorry,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
what I will say is that the water quality data we have from the 3 ponds I mentioned, so not including George, shows that all 3 of those lakes are already have phosphorus levels that are above the sort of biologically relevant thresholds for cyanobacteria. So does that guarantee you're going to have a bloom? No, but it makes blooms much more likely. We are already above that threshold. And so it is much easier and cheaper to maintain good water quality than it is to remediate water quality when you have a severe problem. And, we are already past the initial threshold in all 3 of these lakes where I would say this is a question that merits attention if you would like to avoid those problems over the medium and long term.
Just a simple question. What's the level of P that you're seeing that, the level that you're concerned with? Yeah, I know. What's the phosphorus concentration?
It varies by lake type. For the lakes in Enfield, above a concentration of 8 micrograms per liter of phosphorus increases your likelihood of cyanobacteria blooms. Crystal and Spectacle are at 9 and 9.5, and Mascoma is at higher than that, 13. So Mascoma is already above the statewide median for phosphorus levels.
Good. Okay, good data. By the way, the data that I'm talking about, I think comes from Lynn, from your studies. That's the only report I've ever seen on the lakes is what it is early in the year and then in July and then whatever. My point, and I'll keep beating on, is why are you blaming the septic systems for this when it seems to be coming in Bicknell Brook, the majority of this? Well, let's consider the next question.
So we have acknowledged it's a multifaceted problem. Runoff is a much more complicated, longer term thing. And the town staff are putting together plans to address that as well. But this is something we can do now. I'll give you one more question before we move on to others, and then we'll come back to you at the end. But I know there's other folks I see hands up online, and for the sake of time, do you have a last comment or a statement before we?
Do I have the last comment?
No, yeah, or I want to make sure we give everybody time.
Sure.
And I'd like to give everybody a chance to speak in a reasonable amount of time tonight. So, so why don't you ask one more question and then we'll go to other people and then we'll come back to you at the end if it doesn't.
Okay, can my wife read the next one? That's
I'm pitching. Are you familiar with the septic system rule that Centerville adopted? If so, why do you feel you had to make so many stricter requirements in this rule?
Yes, we are familiar with this, with the Sunapee one. That's the first thing that was drafted. I think, let's see, I think the only thing that's stricter is,
We added the inspection.
right,
And then we did away with the waiver process because it's an
Right.
administrative night.
right. So we got rid of the waiver for, administrative reasons, and then the inspections added so that we can address the problem, because simply identifying the problem doesn't improve the situation.
However, one of the regulations does say, exceptions to these regulations are to be determined by the town select board or its designee.
I saw that. I thought it'd be nice to include in the rule, similar to what, something similar to what somebody said, clearly stating that you can apply for a waiver of up to 6 years and no one's exclusion for inspection.
Mhm.
And I don't see the problem with administrating this rule, but I understand, I heard your words.
Okay. Thank you. All right, but,
Someone else was speaking.
I see Shirley first, so Shirley, let's go to you next.
I just had a comment on the, under normal circumstances, the most phosphorus would come from Big Mill Brook.
Mhm.
But when we have torrential rains, you don't know what they're gonna wash out.
Okay.
There was a leach field that washed out last year, and that certainly affects your lake.
I see a hand in the back. Can you just state your name again?
Hi, my name is Betty Plickville, and I know that the data that John was using was from Lynn's figure 6 Crystal Lake total phosphorus comparison.
Mhm.
And I can hand this to you if you'd like to see it. But what it states is the Bicknell Brook, and that's the one, my printer was dying, so I had to go over it, but the numbers were clear. This was Bicknell Brook on June 15th, Bicknell Brook right after that storm, and Bicknell Brook on October 3rd. So I just saw, and then 2 other locations were the outlet and the deep place, which there is a map on Glenn's report that shows where the deep thing is. The thing that I wanted to share was another thing from Glenn's report, and that is figure 5 Crystal Lake, the long-term total phosphorus and dissolved color data. And I just printed out, well, actually my printer only printed out the phosphorus one. But what I did was I took averages over the last 24 years that the data was compiled for, and the average was around 60 parts per billion of phosphorus. And what you see, if you can see this line that looks like basically somebody having a heart attack, which is kind of like our lake, is that it went, from highs to lows. But I want to say that, yes, last year, following that storm, we had a number of 90 parts per billion of phosphorus in our lake. The year before, it was 40 parts per billion. If it's the septic tanks, then you would imagine you would see a constant level up at the high end. And that's not what you see. And I believe that, I didn't get a chance today, but I believe that you could look at when we've had large storms and when we've had climate affecting our lakes, either by snow runoff or whatever. And that would account for these huge discrepancies in what's happening with the phosphorus count. So I think that it's an important thing to take a look at that, because there's no reason why, if septic tanks are the issue, it would be so low in 2022 and then jump so high. And of course, what I'd like to see is that we take a longer range view of what the data is and see, because we've had a lot of 90-degree days. We've had the state take out 2 boards, which would lower the lake, which theoretically would raise the temperature of the lake. And yet we have had no cyanobacteria blooms. I also think it's really incumbent upon the board to think about the people that live on Crystal Lake in smaller homes that come for 2 weeks a year, and that's all they use their septics for. And I think, and I'm not one of them, I'm just saying, I'm willing to do that every 3 years, so put me down. I'm not arguing this for myself on any level, but I know that my neighbors, one to the right, never comes. He had 3 family members from another family that used it for 2 weekends, and they go to their dad's house. He never comes to the lake. The lady on the other side of me was not here all year round last year, and she will not be here but for 2 weeks this year. She comes from Chicago. She drives herself. She's 80-something years old. So I think you have to take a look at what the rationale is. And I understand it's a complete administrative nightmare to say who uses the septics for how long and whatever. But there should be a waiver process that's allowable for people like that.
Okay, thank you.
Bill Griffin of Conklin Road. As far as septic's being not used and used very little, I bought a brand new house. My septic system was dead for lack of use. So everything that was going in there wasn't being processed right. So there's another side to the systems not being used. They had to pump it out, reintroduce bacteria in it and get it going. So that's not, lack of use is also a problem with the septics. There has to be a flow going through them to make them work properly.
Are you saying that once the person uses it, then it's a problem? Because how could there be a flow if nobody's using water?
Right, the septic can hide it, which is what happened at my house. So then they had to go in, pump the tanks out, reintroduce bacteria into it. And then once you start using it, it's fine again. But if we hadn't had that inspected, we wouldn't have known the septic was dead. We would have been filling that up and never knowing what was going on with a system that wasn't gonna work. It's almost brand new.
John, is it,
Now, a question, Bill, how do they determine the septic system is dead? But there's anaerobic critters that stay in there for a long, long time.
so wait, time out. We're not gonna go back and forth with each other. We're gonna take everybody at their, he's relaying his story and we're gonna listen to that and the name and time. Is there anybody else in this room? I see we have a few hands up online. I want to get to them. Okay, yeah, right.
Hi, Angela Orlando. Question for DES. She's still on?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
When was that sample taken that read 9 for Crystal Lake?
Those data were from the 2023 VLAP report, which summarizes across multiple visits throughout, multiple samples throughout the summer. I believe it was 3 samples across the summer, 1 per month. We did see that last year had higher phosphorus levels in most of our lakes because of the flooding. However, the phosphorus trends are stable by and large when you take a multi-year look. So those numbers are representative.
Have any samples been taken in 2024?
Yeah, so we have a volunteer who will take the samples and bring them to DES. We do the laboratory analysis, and then this coming winter we'll provide a similar summary report for 2024 across all of the samples for the year.
Thank you. Just one more quick question. I think there's been some history of DES partnering with towns, lakeside residents with the same issue and providing grants in terms of septic inspections and septic replacements. Has the town and DES been communicating about potential help with funding where people might have some catastrophic expenses associated with this?
And if we, or is it too soon?
We've been looking, I haven't been coordinating with DES, but there's multiple funding opportunities out there. The state does have some funding. There's federal funding to help people if there's catastrophic failure. There's qualifications on a lot of that, but there is some help out there for the people that need it.
Or the income, it's, when we say need, it's need, financial need, not
Most
need,
of
I
them
don't
are-
feel like paying it.
Yeah, most of
Okay.
them are financial.
Okay, that's what I figured. No, I mean.
And I will add that this is one of the incentives of having a watershed-based plan like the one that's currently being prepared for Mascoma, is that opens up a funding source from DES that you can choose to use for septic cost share grants to homeowners.
Yeah, and Crystal Lake should be a part of this watershed management plan because it's the Mascoma watershed, which includes Crystal Lake.
I think I'm gonna go online. They've been waiting patiently. For the folks online, I can't see your names because there's so many, but I can see initials. So the folks with initials TC, can you go first? I see you just turned your camera on. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, Ann Claus over on Holly Drive and Crystal Lake. I have a member of the family that works in the septic system as well, and having a conversation with her, it sounds, and maybe the DES representative can confirm, sounds like it's eventually going to be mandated from the state, that there's a lot of legislation that's in works right now and talk and concern. So that being it, and it sounds like a lot of people right now, is the concern of doing it every 3 years and the cost that it's going to be put the onus on the landowners. And I get that, and septic 3 years is fine with me. From the state or even from the town, to help alleviate that cost, could we absorb a town position that would be the inspector for the septic, so that wouldn't be out of pocket expense for owners on either of the lakes or all three of the lakes? Just a thought that maybe having an inspector that is a position from the town or from the state, meaning one less cost from landowners. That's my comment.
Good, yes, thank you for that comment. Next up, I see HS.
Yeah, this is Heidi Sidley over on Crystal Lake. I had two questions. I think Ed addressed a little bit of what I was going to ask. What is the plan for an official water management plan for Crystal Lake? How would we request it or begin that process? Because I think getting the data is really critical for Crystal Lake and the long-term solutions that both incorporates the runoff and the septic issue, which we all seem to agree is sort of the top two contributors to the phosphorus and potential contamination. And then my second question is, how can we help to fund the septic requirements for those that aren't able to pay, people on fixed income, if their septic systems are inspected and they fail and they don't have the money to replace and fix them, having their homes labeled as uninhabitable and they can't live there anymore is pretty draconian. What can we potentially put in place to assist those people that need financial assistance?
I'd like to hear from some people from Mascoma Lake. Mascoma Lake residents. This tells me something.
We're here.
Crystal Lake is packed meeting.
Not by our choice.
Yeah, but we're getting one slice here.
One question. Martha Barnes from Mascoma Lake.
Thank you.
How did this get advertised? Because we didn't know until we went to the Mascoma meeting on Saturday. And this gentleman let us know that there would be this meeting.
Our agendas are always published on the town website. It's the primary way to find agenda items for the select board.
Yeah, and once we have a final draft, we'll have a public hearing that'll be advertised in the paper.
Yeah, and the general process going forward is we're gonna hopefully have a final draft tonight, which would be sent to legal, and then would come back for a final review of the board, and then we would have public hearings around what would be a potential final draft.
Also, Crystal Lake has an outstanding lake association. They communicate. And, it's the name of the game.
We'll go back to, so to address the one sort of question, it falls into what Ed said around potential funding mechanisms are under investigation, but there's nothing in place.
There are grant opportunities and, this is coming to a highlight because we're talking about a septic regulation around the lakes, but we deal with this right now. If someone has a failed septic system in town, they have to replace their system immediately. Right. The health officer goes in, there's a few ways we can work through some items with them, but we have people not on the lake right now that are working through USDA grants and things to get septic systems replaced. So it's not something new to this regulation. It's something we deal with all the time.
Can you confirm my first question? Ed, can you just confirm my first question that Crystal Lake is incorporated into that watershed management plan for Mascoma? Am I correct in understanding that, or do we have to do one separately?
It was part of my plan, and we will have someone from the Crystal Lake Association as part of the committee to put that together. It's a Mascoma Lake watershed plan, which to me would include Grafton Pond, Crystal Lake, Mascoma River. You know, I've asked Canaan and Hanover to be part of that as well, because their watersheds feed down into Mascoma Lake as well. So we wanted to make it
Understood.
as possible.
Bob, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, Bob Cusick. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mascoma has had, or that area has had some incidents of ALS that I think Dartmouth has been looking at. I'm not sure if it's, related entirely to the lake, but ALS has kind of been proven to have some relationship with this bacteria, I think. And it's open for discussion, but it's not.
To be fair, please don't use the word proven. That is not true.
Okay, it's been reported that there may be some relationship between cyanobacteria and ALS. Now, if it's right, I feel bad for them. If it's wrong, then, it's something else we got to look at. The other thing is, most directly, if you live on Crystal Lake, we had a complete week wipeout when we had our family here. The kids weren't allowed in the water. The dogs weren't allowed in the water. Nobody was allowed in the water. And people that went in it were risking serious problems if it's related to ALS. So I think that all of us should be willing to take a step. And, if people can't afford it, then we can do something. If people can't afford to redo their septic, then there can be grants, or even put it on, the town will charge, they can pay it off on their tax bills. But the lakes are important. And we just heard from the town assessor that the lakes are going to have a bigger portion of probably the taxes coming up. And if you get a bad rep on your lake, as they've done up, I forget which lake it was in Vermont, but they had problems and the value of their properties went down. So we have to be careful. One, we have to be stewards of the watershed. And the second thing we have to do is we have to worry about the thing financially. And then last, but health, that's important. So all those things are important.
Thank you, Bob. David?
Dave Buffet. At least some of you were here at the previous hearing or meeting that where this was preliminarily just discussed, and the overwhelming majority of that group was in favor of developing something like this. And packing a meeting just means showing up, and maybe you don't want to hear what is being said, but this is an important discussion to have on both sides. So that's, I would, rather than deny that, I would applaud the fact that there are so many people from Crystal Lake here, and maybe more from Mascoma. We don't live on either.
Thank you, David. Yeah, thank you. Right here.
I'm Karen Purrier, and regarding the older septic systems and the leakage in the lake, Crystal Lake takes water samples of the lake periodically. And I just feel if there are high levels of bacteria found maybe on the shoreline of a person's property, then maybe several samples are taken at various times to validate that this septic system has a problem and leakage into the lake. And then notify the property owner and have the property owner then apply for a new design and, give him so many days to work through that. And then that person would be in need of replacing that septic system versus a lot of us that maybe just have holding tanks, or the lot acreage is not adequate size for the new regulations of the septic system. That would maybe help with the situation of old septic systems. And also that House Bill 1113 just passed, and that House Bill was for the protection of the lakes, the quality of the lakes. And that helps identify septic systems that aren't functioning property in real estate transactions. So the buyer then would have to, you know, replace all of that. So in a sense, what I'm saying is you can really solve the problem presently by monitoring the lake sources, and for the future coming in with this House Bill 1113. The other thing, if you're concerned about pumping every 3 years, then why don't we do like a documentation or record keeping that, for instance, I had mine pumped out, so I have documentation who did it. And then we submit that documentation when we pay our property taxes. I mean, that's just another column to check off that every 3 years or 5 years, whatever the situation is, that we are pumping our septic systems. And that might be a win-win situation. I mean, we want to be proactive versus, I think, reactive in just overall stating what we should be doing and, in a sense, restricting us financially and putting a burden on us.
Okay, thank you. And that list of record keeping around who about the pumping records is part of what's proposed here. I'm just gonna give, if there's anybody with a new, who hasn't spoken yet, then we'll go back to folks who have. All right, good.
Hi, Betty Flickta again. I live on Crystal Lake Road. So when the gentleman over there said that there are people not on the lakes that are currently having to deal with their septic tanks and get them pumped, my question is, do you have everybody within 4 miles of that person have to pump their septic tank? And I don't think that that's the way to go. I think that what most of us are reacting to is just this dogma of then your house will be, whatever, condemned. And I'm worried for people that live on the lake who don't even have the property to have a new $40,000 or $50,000 septic tank put on. That, what happens to those people? These are our community members.
But basically, you're focusing on the horror story, right? Oh my goodness, that poor person's gonna have to replace their system. Mainly what we're saying is pump it every 3 years. That's it. Okay, if there's a disaster, yes, then like in any other place in town, if stuff is flowing over ground, it'll have to be dealt with. And if the guy pumping the septic system says this thing is total solids, well, then maybe there's a problem. But I do it every 3 years, and I live up on a hill. I have a ton of land. But that is the sensible thing to do if you want to stay out of trouble and never have to replace your septic system. Pump it.
I agree. What I'm concerned with is the people who are going to face the huge possibility when they have land that their house is just about swept onto the property. What do they do?
Our lot is 0.24.
Yeah.
And we have a state-of-the-art septic system that takes up very little space. That turns the leach field, the water, they say we could use it. It's a wastewater treatment. It's I'm not either. But it's a wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah.
And that is really what is ideal. Any size lot can take that.
Yeah.
And if you live on the lake, you have a responsibility to take care of that water in front of your house. It should be counted in as an expense, just like taxes.
Yeah, I think that's it, Tom. The way they can design systems now, they can fit on pretty much any lot. Yeah, so another one in the back.
Becky French, I'm up on Crystal Lake. I just want to clarify. The lady from the state was talking about a Mascoma Lake watershed thing. And then this is separate, or does this combine with that? Are they overlapping?
So this would be a town regulation for the 4 main bodies of water in town,
And
which is,
so how does that intersect with the
So the-
one that they're doing?
so Lebanon in conjunction with Enfield have applied for and received a grant to create a plan for the entire Mascoma watershed. So that's separate, but it is overlapping because this regulation, the potential of this is to address part of the water quality within the watershed. Go ahead, Ed.
The watershed plan that we're working on will not create regulations and things that need to be done. It's really just a plan to say, here's what's happening in the area. This is what you can do to clean the water up.
Okay.
This is
So
separate.
that's like
but
a
it's-
plan to diagnose what's going on and diagnose and give options of what's the best way to handle it. But this has got teeth in it that's gonna really make people do it,
And think about this,
right?
Crystal Lake runs down into Mascoma Lake. Mascoma Lake becomes Lebanon's drinking water.
Oh, yeah, I know. Oh, I know that.
So that's an awesome responsibility for us all like that.
What about some of the other brooks, like the Indian River and stuff, other brooks that are coming into it? Are those gonna be included in the,
They're not in this draft. This draft is, would apply to properties within the 250-foot buffer around George Pond, Spectacle Pond, Crystal Lake, and Lake Mascoma. Yeah. Whereas in the 250 feet is the state's.
okay, so
Storefront.
if somebody is on one of the brooks and their system fails, there's nothing,
Well, this regulation will not apply, but as Ed has said,
Yeah.
we have that situation right now,
I
actually.
mean, people are really dwelling on that, but if any septic system fails in town, you have to replace it, and the health officer will be there. So if your system fails on Crystal Lake tomorrow, we'll be out there, you'll be replacing your septic.
right?
Right.
It's, what we're asking is that you pump your tank once every 3 years and get an inspection. I look at the inspection as not a pass fail, but hey, this is not doing well. You can work on it, try to save your system doing it this way or that way. Or maybe they're gonna let me know that in the next 5 years, you need to replace your septic system and it gives me time to plan. If you wait long enough till you have a failed system and they come out to inspect it, we're already past
Like
that.
this guy just said, have it pumped out every 3 years. Sure, when you said you got a state of the art system, how old is your house?
The house age really doesn't affect the septic system, we just had it.
How do you think your system is state of the art and that your system can't fail? Is that what you're saying? Around system.
Nobody said it can't fail.
We inspect, they suggest the people that put it, design it, put it in, that it's inspected every other year and pumped every other year. And that's what we
Like
do.
you said, just pump your system.
And it's the way, yeah, and it's the
Got no
wastewater.
problem.
So let's try to keep moving. Is there anyone else who is?
Who does the inspection? Is that the town or is that
So the homeowner would hire a certified inspector to write a report.
is that the same person that does the pumping? Like, do they do it or is it?
It depends if they have a certification, they could, but there's a state certification for inspections and stuff, and that you'd have to, the homeowners would have to find a person with the proper certification. Right here.
Hi, Pete Hugo. I'll speak from ourselves here. We have no problems with the pumping. We understand the importance of getting that done. That's not a question. But that's more money that we have to pay now as lakefront people. And it's gonna be roughly about $800 every 3 years, thereabouts. But here's my question, and this is more rhetorical than anything else. You're asking the lake people to do something. Yet we've identified that Bicknell Brook is the main cause of our phosphorus. And what is being done by the town with our taxes to look to see why that water is running all the way down? No one's ever done that.
Eric, can I?
Go ahead.
Well, I've been sitting here, so I've got a couple of points. So you guys have talked about Bicknell Brook, but I think you have to remember, these are samples, right? So you don't go sample every inch of the lake. You don't go in front of each of your neighbor's house and sample. So they're sampling sites. You're going to see the sites that are selected. They're selected for a reason. Obviously, Bicknell Brook is selected because it has a lot of inputs. You sample the deep water because it has a lot of inputs. I'm sure, it's easy to imagine you're getting more data than you actually are. You know, you're not getting a data point from everywhere. So that's one. And then two, you know, we're hearing a lot about finances, and I certainly can respect everyone on finances. When you ask everybody else in town to pay and they don't have lake frontage, you have to imagine that doesn't feel great. Like, you don't want to pay for the sewer system downtown, right? And they probably don't want to pay for you. So to be fair, let's say you did implement something where the town paid for it, it's still going to go into your taxes. There isn't a magic pot of money anymore. Right? This is all coming out of everyone's taxes at the end of the day, no matter which route. Anytime you ask to spend more money, we have to raise and appropriate it. So we have to be really careful about what we ask for and how we shift burden. And then the third part I want to say is, we're talking a lot about, well, what about this? What about that? But we acknowledge at the beginning, this is one of our methods of control, right? We're looking at the stormwater. We have this Mascoma Lake watershed area, which includes other towns, other contributors. So think of it like Swiss cheese, right? You get a bunch of layers of Swiss cheese and you line them up and you're hoping you're going to prevent the problem from going through, right? So each time you add a layer of protection and you do some work, it advances you towards your goal, which is obviously not to have cyanobacteria, not to have these issues. There's no one thing that's going to do it. So poking holes in it and saying, oh, you know, we can't do it because of this. We have to look at each portion of the problem and kind of say, what can we do that we can afford as a town that doesn't increase the tax burden on everyone? Yes, I understand it's a regulation, but you know, this is somewhat user-based, right? Like, I have family who lives on Mascoma Lake. We're very fortunate to be on the lake. Not everybody is that fortunate. So I think just got to be a little cognizant about what we're doing in terms of asking for burden shifting. And then my fourth point is just, again, on this cost piece, this worst case scenario, what if everything fails? What if they can't afford it? So we have a Department of Health and Human Services in this town. We take care of our neighbors who are truly unable to afford things. It's not just something we do it's state law. So you guys, there are options for these worst case scenarios. This is why I asked the I don't want to pay question earlier, right? Because none of us want to pay for anything. It's like the worst part of adulting. But we have to be able to look at, you know, real worst case scenarios, look at real financials. We have someone in the department who does that, who is very, very good at it. And they are good at finding resources and they are good at finding grants, and Ed is an excellent resource. So I'd like to set aside that piece because I have no doubt that we can get people who are truly indeed taken care of.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, one more.
Again, we pay for somebody. And I believe we get a grant as well. There are some donations and so on, to have somebody at our dock to make sure that people that don't live on our lake, when they come in, don't carry what we want, milfoil and anything else. So we're spending money on townspeople that want to come use this. Plus the fact that if you go on a weekend, either our dock, the other day I counted 17 cars along 4A that are not Mascoma Lake residents, but yet they're using Mascoma Lake. So when we say town, I think the lakes are for everybody. Mm-hmm. And we appreciate and love that people can use our lakes. But if we continue to just maybe just look at one spot, you know, the biggest problem is being overlooked, and the properties are gonna go down, and we lost 3 weeks last year because of the cryo.
Yeah. And the runoff is something the town is working on in the
Yeah,
longer term.
but Ed says that's gonna be a long time coming.
Absolutely.
We're looking at it. Yeah, it's gonna be
I mean, it wouldn't be so hard to go up, and but the other thing, you know, go up, but the other thing Crystal Lake is doing is we will be testing every home in the lake. Because we've got it's called CLEAN. I'm sure some of you have seen it. It's incredible. It's a group, it's a subgroup of our Crystal Lake Association, that we have people that are we're setting up testing around the whole lake. And we will be looking at, and we will be paying for it ourselves to see what's going on. That's how much we care. And I know you guys do too. Thank you for listening to me and I know you can.
Okay, thank you. Glenn?
Yeah, Glenn Green, I'm on Crystal Lake also. Crystal Lake has an intense water monitoring program. All right. Our samples are gathered weekly. All right, we just did that today. I don't know where the state is getting their phosphorus samples, who's doing it. I've been doing it for 30 years and I never met anybody else out there doing it.
Right.
I don't know where they're getting those samples. I don't care. I have all that data for, well, since 1988. We have only ever had recorded one cyanobacteria problem. Consequently, you see a lot of people in Crystal Lake here because it did a better job of getting information out to people than I have. But the fact of the matter is, we do all this testing. We know what's going on in the lake. We do have input from Bicknell Brook. There's a lot of things going on up Bicknell Brook, and that's probably why. The other thing, any woodlands or anything like that, if you have a heavy rain, you're gonna get a lot of phosphorus into the lake from that, through the Bicknell Brook. But the big thing that I think has got everybody upset on Crystal Lake is that cyanobacteria thing we had last year. And I mean, I've been doing this sampling on the lake for a long time, and this is the first time ever that I know of. And if you, I mean, other people may have additional records, but I don't know if anybody it's ever happened.
Thank you.
The end of my comment.
All right. Yes, we'll be back to John.
Back to John, okay. I have a few, before we get to another question, I have a few comments to make. One, this rule is based on writing, talking about septic systems to avoid nuisances and public health concerns. And we identified any nuisances or public health concerns related to septic sanctions. That's the first point, okay? Second, there's a word we bandy around, septic tank failures. I submit there's a lot of folks on Crystal Lake, Mascoma, every lake in Quebec, they have a septic system that will not pass inspection, but they're happier than pigs in a poo because they can still live in that thing. Failure, most folks will know the septic tank or leach field has failed when it backs up. Okay, that's one thing. But the septic system itself doesn't have to be working perfectly in order to do a sufficient job that the lake sees no harm. So when we talk about failure, it really concerns me. I think if you don't pass inspection, that's probably known as a failure, but I'm not sure. Third point I want to make is, I think folks expect that septic tanks will produce closer drinking water to the lake. I want you to know that every treatment plant in this state, in this country, in the world, produces an effluent that's full of pollution, but does not overburden the stream, the river, the lake that it goes to. So even though a septic system is always going to be producing phosphorus, and I don't know about the other E. coli or whatever, but I submit that that's not overburdening our lake, that it's not doing any harm to our lake. We got fish and we got critters in there that are happy with this stuff. We also have ducks and geese and whatever that are pooping all over the place. Okay, we have to think about that. So I just want, we don't expect septic systems to produce this great water. Now, question number 5.
Question number 5, can you tell us why you would not allow the exemption from the 3-year pumping interval such as Centipede has in their rule?
You remember exactly what the Centipede wants? Our logic was simplicity, same rules for everybody.
Come on now.
Yeah, the waiver would allow, instead of 3 years, 6 years for seasonal residents that minimally use their property. Again, it's hard to track that, and then it's also hard to verify that that's actually what's happening. I mean, to be fair, that's what we would have to do. If you Airbnb'd out or used it all summer and called it seasonal, you're still taxing your system and it would be difficult for us to do that.
Well, I think they'd be in the most danger if they're not used regularly.
Yeah. And
That's why they need to be inspected.
I move that it's time to end this meeting, this discussion.
I just like
It's
to
really
add,
redundant.
It is, I'm, as everyone knows, I'm always hesitant to stop people going.
I just have a couple of comments and then I'll,
John, one more,
Yeah.
if he's got a number 6,
yeah, go ahead and then I
and
have
then
a
we'll
couple
move
of
on.
comments.
Well, I'm the guy reading the question.
Okay.
I don't agree with that answer. If there is no scientific evidence of harm to the lake from the septic systems, why do you require everyone to have their systems inspected and face an extremely expensive action if they don't pass this inspection? Or even face the possibility of losing their homes?
I think we've heard tonight from DES that there is evidence that septic systems have a negative impact on lake water quality. And that our lakes in town, the multiple lakes have a higher than acceptable level of phosphorus in them.
What does that come from? Septic tanks? Big no work, if they run the runoff.
Yeah, it's multifaceted.
It's multifaceted, this is the one we can do. I understand I'm not gonna provide you with a satisfactory answer tonight, but that is the answer. All right, so we'll go back to the board.
Just a couple of comments, really. I agree with very much a lot of what people are saying. I agree that Bicknell Brook is an issue to be dealt with. I don't think it's fair, however, to remove septic systems from the thought process because we'd be blaming Bicknell Brook for all of the problem. It's not fair. It's a multifaceted issue. I think that we're not putting enough emphasis on inspection of systems. With a certified evaluator to look at each system, I think we can look at things like allowing a very seasonal use camp to not necessarily be pumped every 2 or 3 years. If someone comes out there for a week or 10 days and then they don't show up for 2 years, I think a certified evaluator looking at the septic system, the tank, seeing if the leach field has failed, but there'll be no indication of it because if they don't use it, you can't see anything in a leach field. I think it's something that can be considered, that we could give permission to someone who has a very seasonal camp to say, you don't have to pump it this year. Your evaluator said you're okay for another year, but it will identify those systems that have already failed that lay people have not seen. And there are systems that fail that lay people simply do not see. Full disclosure, I live on Shaker Boulevard. I've owned a house there since 1998. I replaced the system when I bought it. I replaced it again about 4 years ago, based on an evaluation of the system. The first time, all I did was replace the tank, which everyone should be aware of. You don't even need a building permit to replace a tank. You just do it. It's allowed. It's a quirk in the state law. You want to yank out the old tank and stick in a new one. The rule is, so long as it fits in the hole. It's a quirk in New Hampshire's law. You can't touch leach systems, however. You can't do them without an approved system. So there are things that people can do if someone came along and said, listen, your septic system is okay. I can't tell anything about your leach system, but your tank is shot. Let's talk about it. There are things that you can do. And I don't think the rule is so hard and fast that says you've got to do it every single time. It allows for exceptions. And I think we're trying to approach a problem that is multifaceted from one particular direction, but there are other directions that we're going to have to look at as well.
Excuse me, the rule as written does not have that exception. Are you saying you have that in the rule?
Exceptions to these regulations are to be determined by the town select board or its designee.
I'm talking about in the rule.
I'm reading the rule.
I know that, excepting that you're gonna broaden it to 6 years, for example.
I don't think it's necessary to define the broadened definition. I think this allows the discretion to be properly used based on a written New Hampshire certified evaluator submitting a report. So if a certified evaluator comes in and he says, that tank is dry as can be, I have nothing to pump, or that tank looks in good condition, but it's not necessary to pump it, it's in the rule.
But the 6 years is not in the rule. Is that my understanding?
I don't think it's necessary because the exception is in the rule. It's right here. It
Well,
allows people to
From
evaluate.
your thinking, the exception is the Board of Select,
That's right.
right?
The exception is determined by the town select board or its designee.
And at the end of the day, we're the people you come to anyways, right? That's how it works.
So try and refocus us on the specific language. Are there changes the board would like to see made to this draft before we send it to legal for review?
In my view, no.
I just had a general question,
Yeah.
so, like, we have it as Lake Mascoma, is that the legal name of it, or is it Mascoma Lake?
So I can look.
Okay, so we probably should flip it to be Mascoma Lake.
Yeah.
I hear people say both, but I don't know what the actual legal.
It's my.
Yes.
I thought, I mean, I lived on there most of my life. So,
Anything else, Kate?
that was mine.
You have one
Oh.
other comment if you want to.
Okay, yeah, so we've got a second comment from initials HS, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Heidi Sidley again. I just had a question. Number one, you know, we did a big push on Crystal Lake to get the New Hampshire lakes out there to do Lake Smart surveys. And they took a lot of data from a lot of people that signed up to do that. So is there a way to somehow get a feel for how many people did that and how many people have already gone through the Lake Smart survey? Because you were required to put the data in for your inspections, your pumpings. We called Julie and we got all the data on our properties of when we inspected and pumped. And it would be interesting to find the data for the whole lake to get sort of, you know, a sort of feel for the lake and what has been done on the Lake Smart surveys recently. And then number two, we also started looking into discounts for group rates. So trying to help offset some of the costs for the pumping and the inspections by getting somebody that would give a group rate if they were coming out to one location to do a bunch of pumpings and discounts. So I just wanted to throw that out there too, as sort of a positive way forward to try and help offset some of the costs associated with some of this. And then maybe another way to get some data from the New Hampshire Lake Associations that are doing the Lake Smart surveys on our lakes.
Go ahead.
New Hampshire Lakes is always in touch with us and lets us know how many have had the survey and how many have passed.
Do
We have that information.
So the Lake Association, can you forward that to the town? Yeah, I mean, I know you guys share all the data, so, but I don't think we've seen that yet. Thank you. Okay, I have one technical comment. The footer is incorrect on this draft, and we should make sure it says draft.
Do you have any more copies of that?
I'll give it.
Okay.
And we'll post it as it becomes closer to a final.
Yeah, yeah. And so that draft has an incorrect footer that says it was adopted and it is not. That is wrong.
Is that on the town website?
When the final draft will be, but that draft is not. A new comment.
Hi, Renee Regan, Rockhaven Road. So a lot of talk tonight, mostly from John, about looking for evidence and proof that the problem is Bicknell Brook, but that the septics is the cause of pollution. I think the DES lady stated that she had that evidence. John or anybody else, does anybody have documented evidence that the septics do not cause pollution?
I can speak to that. I do not have evidence, except my knowledge of what happens with septic systems and the release of it as it passes through the soil on the way to the lake. It'd be difficult to attribute what we might call, E. coli in the lake to a particular septic system. It'd be difficult to do that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so what's the pleasure of the board?
The only thing I would add under exceptions would be a very brief line that says a request for an exemption should be submitted to the town select board or its designee.
What you're doing then is opening it up to a logistical nightmare.
Well, the option is here. I guess all I'm asking is that we write it, but you're right, I believe it's still there. So that if someone has an inspection and they don't want to have it pumped, I believe that they can come back and simply ask.
If
Do I have
50
to?
people want to take that option, how do we deal with that?
take the option of not having it
Yeah.
pumped based on a written report from a New Hampshire certified evaluator?
As long as that statement is in there.
Agreed.
Okay, I'm there.
If a new,
You're taking that sentence out of this draft?
no, no.
Get in there.
We're putting reliance on a written report from a New Hampshire certified evaluator. As it says,
I got that part. I'm talking about the waiver part.
if a New Hampshire certified evaluator said something, then there might be grounds for someone to come back to the select board and request not to pump it that year.
And what Tracy's asking for is simply to state that that request for would be sent to select board or the designee. So
That's all.
really all we have to do is that exceptions can be the responsibility of the select board.
Or their
Request
designee.
should be submitted.
That's
I mean, I think it's implied that that's who you.
I think it's implied too, and I'm not sure.
Well,
that's
we could easily just say that outright. That's the application process.
Select board, I think we made uniform the select and board as two separate words. I know we've had it over the years, but I think that was one, I think that's where we landed, just, I.
I know.
And one of them says Board of Selectmen, so that should be changed to Select Board.
Okay.
And
That's right. Anything else from the board on the
no, I'm done.
written? Okay. Dan, what do you?
Hi, Dan Regan, Lockhaven Road. I too would like to end this discussion, but I think we've just went to a spot that's new, so I'd like to address it. We have a lot of very intelligent people that work at the Department of Environmental Services, including the woman who spoke tonight, as well as at New Hampshire Lakes. And they put out some very good information, including fact sheet SSB-13, you and your septic system. In this fact sheet, it states, first and foremost, inspect your septic tank every year. Your tank should be pumped out at least every 2 or 3 years. It says nothing about you have an exception if you only go there on Sundays, that you don't have to pump it out. This is what it's saying. It's saying that these things, just because you're using it a little bit, doesn't mean it's a healthy tank. And just as my friend here said, you could be doing more harm than good by not using it. So I don't think we can start getting cute with the rules. We're either in or out. And this is important to our lakes, and this is important to the health of our community.
Let's hear you.
Dan Ryder, I come here to see my neighbors from Crystal Lake. The one thing I might add is, or just, I'm not sure whether there's a hope or a request or what, but some help from the contracting people, getting a good rate on inspections and pumping. You're going to require this of people. It would help you if you had something to offer in addition to the requirement to help defray the cost of doing something. I think that would be to everybody's advantage.
Yeah, David?
Yeah, Buffet again, just a point of information. When you say your designee, I'm presuming that you're talking about the health officer for the town or the building inspector.
Whoever they desire to.
Yeah, the board would have to make that decision.
Isn't that the obvious one?
Yes, I think that is the obvious one. However.
We
normally-
just had a vacancy.
It could be the town manager. Yeah, but yes, the health officer is the obvious choice for that, but that has not been discussed at this point.
And I think something we probably is not general knowledge is in New Hampshire, like during COVID, we were required to have a former board of health. And I raised my hand and said, do I have to be on the board of health? Because I have no qualifications. The answer is yes, it's state law. So everybody who's sitting up here is a member. It's just how it works. Yep, that's New Hampshire for you guys. So,
Thank you so much for the reminder.
yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Todd and I were
I
like,
tried to put that behind me.
So we're gonna see. So I see, what will hopefully be one final comment. So HS, you still have your hand up. Did you have another comment to finish us off this evening? All right, I'm gonna assume that you just left your hand up. Okay, so pleasure of the board. Tracy recommended including a short line that applications for waivers will be submitted to the select
We
board.
don't need to include it. It's implied in the current writing.
I think it is as well.
Yeah.
So I don't think we need to do it. I don't know if we're gonna have any mention of the fine that's involved. I think that's something that does need to be reviewed.
Yeah, I'll have that reviewed with the.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I suspect that's gonna,
My only comment is I think that's low. What's
Yeah.
written.
I think what comes back, you're gonna think is low, but it's state law.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so. Do we need to have a vote to send it to legal or just?
We can.
And you guys.
Yeah, okay, I would
Okay with it.
entertain a motion to forward the draft as written to legal for review and opinion.
A second. Third.
Okay, discussion of the motion. Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay, so just for everybody's information, we're gonna forward the draft as written. There's gonna be a couple of minor corrections, like correcting the footer, making sure it states that it's a draft, that sort of thing. It'll be forwarded to the town council for review and opinion. And then we'll get it back here, and then we'll have a public hearing around if there's a final draft that we decide we want to put forward.
And it will be posted
Yeah.
in public prior
Right.
to the
Yeah.
public hearing.
Right,
The draft would be posted publicly.
absolutely. Yep. Go ahead.
Just one more question I thought about. It'd be interesting to know what the average person in town pays a year for their sewage. I'm sure it's much more than an inspection.
Oh, come on.
I'll be quiet.
Get on the bus.
That is a brilliant question.
We're going to refrain from that discussion at the moment. All right.
Easy.
So to close out that particular discussion, I do want to say thank you to everybody for coming. It's really.
Very informative. Thank you all.
We appreciate this.
Very good.
Thank you, Anita.
It shouldn't be an interview, guys.
And I'm not gonna sorry.
Sorry. Yeah.
I doubt very much that this company that we all use. have sufficient- they may have some-
Yeah, and
Everybody's gonna need.
Yeah.
So
Outreach system.
Yes, also, reliable,
Yes, all my.
good reputation, concerns is not necessary.
Who's their neighbor? Who's their neighbor?
Well, on Friday, I went to see my dermatologist and he had asked me was a liquid nitrogen.
all right, folks. If you have discussions with your neighbors, please take it outside. We still have more than half of our agenda remaining.
Thank you all.
Yes, can you take out, can you step out?
They want you to.
Yeah.
Leave or talk out there.
Yeah.
They're trying to-
We're gonna continue the meeting, so we're not asking anyone to leave.
I get my pump every 3 years and it's inspected. I'm just 2 miles from the lake.
You're such a good man, Dan. Thank you.
Yep, we're not requesting people.
We'll
leave.
extend
We are
the system.
requesting, that we are able to continue the meeting and there's plenty of space outside if you wanna have discussions with your neighbors. So
Sorry.
that's no problem, no problem. All right, moving on with our agenda. Next up is conceptual plans and public concerns discussion for the Shaker Byway Trail project. Ed, do you wanna kick us off on that?
Yeah, let me go ahead and share the screen. There's not much there, but, we talked about this a lot when we were applying for the grant and even getting the grant, but, part of the grant requirements is to have a public meeting about the concept that we're planning on doing. This is an engineered layout of the trail. I can zoom in a little bit, but it'll start getting into small pieces if I go too far. But, pretty much planning on coming up next to the Tacoma Beach parking area off of Route 4. The reason we did that is, ADA accessibility issue, you know, coming down this hill there is really steep and hard. So what we're looking at doing is crossing at the crosswalk there and then coming up the side of the road and then getting on the trail there. Continuing along the side of Route 4A. We did make one change after the sale of La Salette. We were gonna cross or help the priests that cross right there with a crosswalk and an RRFB, the flashing lights. After the sale of the property, I've talked to the Shaker Museum and we're gonna continue the trail down the side, down to the stone building and then put the crossing down there for the Shaker Museum. So that's kind of the concept of what we're thinking right now. I don't have a picture of it readily available, but we're also looking at that new sidewalk area that we put in along Main Street. The reason we did that temporary was to engineer some parallel parking along Main Street there. We do have, we do have approval from DOT to move forward with that project. We don't have full approval to build it, but for, approval to move forward with designing and implementing some parking along there. So that's really the concepts that we're doing and wanted to just talk now with the select board and talk with the public to see if there's any input, things that they would like to see in this project. We will be coming back next month with what we call an alternatives plan. So we'll have a couple alternatives to this trail in the same area and we'll talk through those before we move into final engineering.
So you don't think there's any chance we could get permission from the state to cross the state land and continue on to be opposite the ballpark?
We might be, but that's not part of this project at all.
But it is conceivable
It's,
that the state might allow us to continue the path since we're only looking at a gravelled path.
it's possible. I will tell you that the state right of ways have been the hardest to get.
I know.
We're still working on the forest land along the wildlife management area, but I have got an initial okay on that. There's some things we need to work on to make that happen, but it would definitely be worth talking to and continuing that trail on down to the Shaker ball fields. If we could cross there, we can get across our land, we know, and then where we go from there, who knows? But, yeah, there's definitely possibility of expanding that further.
And the nature of the design of the trail is, as you've described it once, basically it's a gravelled path using small bore gravel.
It's pretty
So
much
it's
like,
bicycle.
pretty much like the rail trail.
So we're gonna use very small gravel. That'll make it possible for a bicycle to go down.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll really be like building the rail trail on this side of 4A.
Yeah.
It'll be very, very similar.
How wide?
About 8 feet.
That much?
Can you pull it down so we can go back to the boat launch, please? So that area near where it starts, with the beach parking.
Yep.
How is that gonna, you know, because we have a lot of folks parking, trailers, is that, it's gonna be on that raised portion, and so there's
Well,
still
the
gonna,
trailers are down here.
down here, okay, so those will remain down there,
This will
we're on the
come
raised.
almost right off the edge of the
Okay.
turn in, so they're usually just a little bit past. that.
Right near the no parking sign that everyone goes right up against.
Yeah.
Okay,
And if we need to, we can block that off a little bit better, but I think it'll go along 4 and then cut
Yeah.
like up across the entrance to that parking a little bit and
I
then.
mean-
I'd like us to consider, a walking process similar to what we just installed at DVS
Yeah,
for across the bridge.
they're
Cheers.
proposed in this project to be right here by Shakoma Beach.
Mhm.
And then to be down by the
But two,
museum.
a solar activated,
Yep.
flashers with
Yep.
signage so that we can cross from Shakoma Beach straight across.
Yep.
Safely. Okay.
and I like,
Great.
I mean, as long as the state is letting people, that's their roads, if they wanna park boats, it gives people an opportunity to walk somewhere safe. Not just for recreation, but also to get them safely back down to their boat. Cause I see a lot of folks walking in the road right now, and I'm just nervous that's gonna be the next big accident, and, that would be really sad.
So we did talk with the state and like I said, we're talking about crossing on the beach side. Now, there won't be a crosswalk on both sides, and we talked about which side would be better, and we've all determined that the crosswalk at the beach side.
I don't want to add a project to anyone, but this could lead to the reconstruction of the Shakoma Beach property.
You'll get one of those soon.
But not today.
Yeah. No,
And not
no,
today.
not today.
Any other comments or questions from the audience?
No, it's great.
Right, public? Comment, Julie?
Good.
No?
It'll be nice.
My understanding is that this is primarily or exclusively in engineering status. It's to this point.
Yeah.
Is there, any timeline for the build?
No, we put in for this grant hoping for engineering and construction. I'm gonna say in normal federal fashion, we were awarded the grant technically last January, and it needed to be completed by this September. With all their approval processes, it would be impossible to get the construction bid out in that time. So we talked with them, and we're gonna move this grant through the engineering phase, and then we'll have a shovel-ready project, which makes you more grant eligible in the future.
So are we submitting for another grant?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll be looking for some more money.
In the future?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's also a good time. I think it was the Heritage Commission that actually initiated this grant. And it's a good value to the town, so we should thank them as well.
It can be a great thing.
Because it will be a great thing, and having the engineering done and being shovel ready
Will make the
it's good
difference.
progress.
That's right.
Good progress. Anything else from anyone? No? All right. Well, there's no action required tonight. This was just a discussion of it, and then we'll continue at our next meeting. Okay, solar grant approval.
Let me get out of this. I think Tim might still be online.
My laptop is dead, so I'm not watching people for anymore. Sorry.
I don't see her on there, but anyway, we can talk about it. So, talking with Kim and the Energy Committee had talked about this some too. The possibility of bringing forward this, Department of Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant for municipal solar to add solar panels to the public safety building. As you guys may remember, it was the charge of the select board to stay within the budget that was adopted at town meeting, but to get as close to net zero or as energy efficient as possible. As we were, engineering and putting together this building, we were able to get some good insulation values, to do some things to be more energy efficient, but we were not able to add solar to the building and within the budget. Looking at this grant, they give up to $120,000 for the purchase of a solar system that's up to 60 kilowatts. What I would like to do is get, authorization from the select board to ask up to 120,000. And then I also want to have the discussion, I did not put this in the packet, but there's been talk of, do we apply for 95,000 and pay for 15 or 20,000 on ourselves? Does that make the application more palatable, or do we just say, we want you to buy us a solar panel system and ask for the true cost of what it would cost to put in for? In looking through the grant requirements, I did not see any match requirements, so it appears that this is a 100% funded grant unless it exceeds the $120,000, and that would have to be supplied with other funds. So, with that, I'd like to have the two discussions with the board. One, whether we put in for this grant or not. I would like to thank Kim that, she's done a lot of the work, working with people at Revision anyway to get the numbers and put it out there. If we do get the grant, I might be back here to ask you to allow us to give Revision the bid for that because of all the groundwork that they did putting this together. But that's a discussion we could have if we get the money and look at the full grant requirements at that time. With that, she's put a lot of that work into it anyway. This grant's due August 1st, so this week, if the select board authorizes us to move forward and put this in, I'll get the work done to make sure that the grant's written and submitted by the time.
There's nothing that limits us to the 120 necessarily in the project, is there?
The maximum grant award is.
The grant award is, but is there anything that limits the town's expenditure of additional funds if, for example, for whatever reason, it was decided that the town would put some money into it in addition to the 120?
Yeah, if the project came back at 150, we could spend one.
We could spend 150. Okay.
I make a motion to authorize the town manager to submit a grant and an amount up to $120,000 for the purchase and installation of a solar energy system for the public safety building through the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Municipal Solar Grant Program.
Second.
Okay, is there a discussion of the specific motion on the table? We can discuss the other question. This is an up to, so it provides the flexibility Ed would need to price it out appropriately. Was there any discussion of this motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, so Ed also asked about whether we would want to consider some matching funds up front. He also said that the RFP does not request matching funds. I guess I work in a business, we do a lot of government contracting, submitting lots of grants. And in my experience, which is a different agencies, so this agency may do it differently, is that if they want you to do matching funds, if that's going to be a consideration, they put it in the request. And that when people put matching funds in on their own behest, which, you know, like we're about to do it on a project we're bidding because it makes sense, it's not part of the evaluation criteria. So I guess I think I would question whether that would be part of the evaluation criteria for awarding grants. And I don't know the answer to that.
I don't either.
But I would
Is that
suspect.
anyone we can contact to ask that foolish question?
It would be in the RFP. I can dig in a little bit more and see, but if it's not one of the criteria for scoring, then it would not be one.
Then I would think we don't need to at this time.
Right, which is where.
Consider it later on.
Which is where I'm leading, that if it's
Yeah.
not one of the criteria for evaluation, there's no reason
There's no reason to put it up front.
to put it up front.
And
Good.
I guess for us right now, like even if we wanted to, where would it come from? Yeah.
Right. Which is another reason not to. So
Sort of hitting a budgetary ceiling.
I mean, I love solar and I think this is really important to a lot of us.
It's not gonna go in until 25 anyway, so, you know,
But
there's other things we can talk about then.
yeah,
So we agreed that unless, well, I mean, you have the flexibility to write it in the best way to increase our probabilities of winning. But unless it's part of the evaluation criteria, I think we request the cost of the project. Because that's what they're asking us to do. All right. Moving on, ARPA wastewater grant amendment extension. This is, I'll go ahead, Ed. This is another sort of formality of contracting.
Yeah, this is really a formality. As you guys know, we approved a wastewater loan of 1.9 million. We had just a little over half of that forgiven and done through ARPA grant. This is an extension for the ARPA grant portion of that. We've done the scoping of the wastewater project. We're putting together RFPs right now for construction. When we did the scoping, the infiltration was not as bad as we expected it to be. So we had some backup options in our plan, one of them being to upgrade some of the pump stations. And so what we're asking you tonight, so we can sign the documentation for the state, is to authorize the time extension from, I'd have to look, I believe it's December to March. It's in there. Actually, from March of 25 to December 25, so I got it backwards. So it gives us a little bit more time and then allows us to increase the scope to add some upgrades and modifications to the pumping stations. There will be no price change, any of those things. We still have the same amount of grants, same amount of forgiveness in our SRF loan. It just allows us to extend it out.
I move the town of Enfield approves the extension and change of scope in the grant agreement and further authorizes the town manager or their designees to execute all documents which may be necessary to effectuate change.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say
I
aye.
need a second.
I was just saying.
Oh, that's right, sorry, give me a second, wait, 8 seconds, sorry. A little jet lagged.
No,
That's all right.
listen, we're all, I think it's about complicated meeting.
You're on.
You're good.
Okay,
You're good.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that is done, and I believe you actually have that for me to sign tonight.
Yes.
Okay. Make sure to do that before we do this. Okay. Inspectors of election appointments.
Packet. I think Elisa did a good job of explaining what needs to be done and that these inspectors be appointed as either full inspectors or alternate inspectors. We need to appoint 2 Republican applicants as inspectors, 1 remaining applicant as an alternate, and then appoint 2 of the Democratic applicants as alternate inspectors.
Who are the current Democratic inspectors of election?
Don't know if I know that offhand.
Did we really get a choice of the party actually?
Well, the thing is, the 2 we're appointing are alternates
Yeah.
to someone.
So I have a question
Is the thing.
around the list.
One is all it's been.
On the Republican side, there's one name listed as an appointment, and then there's 3 applicants, and so there's 4 different names. And at least recommend, is said as saying 2 inspectors and 1 alternate. Is that one of those names not an applicant, or will we have 2?
I think it's of the applicants.
Okay.
Can I offer some insight?
Absolutely.
Please.
Not to interrupt here, but since I'm the one that works with all these folks and knows this a little bit more intimately. So according to the law, people have to, if applicants have been appointed by the party, they actually get precedent over anyone that has submitted an application. So with that said, and we've normally have had 3 inspector of elections from each party, and then we've had a whole list of alternates. We haven't limited to like 2 and 2 and 2 and 2. Technically, for an election, I only need to have 1 from each party working. But we have multiple stations, so you don't have to worry about that. But so for the Republicans, Nicole Lovejoy has been set, was nominated by her party. So we have to accept that one. I would say then we, pick Francine or Shirley, I would say pick Francine and Shirley as the other 2, and then make Susan Gibson the alternate. I don't know Susan. Francine and Shirley have been doing it for, I don't know how many years. Shirley's right there. But there are reliable ones that know the system. On the Democrat side, we normally don't, normally we get a big list. On this list, Kathy Ducato is on it, nominated by the party. She dropped out and didn't want to be a ballot clerk a couple of years ago. We can make her one, but she used to do it quite consistently, but then after the pandemic and she's got some other things going on, she didn't want to do it anymore. So I do know that the parties don't always necessarily contact people, and sometimes they just nominate them. So unfortunately, that makes our job a little bit harder. Rebecca Powell has been with us forever. So I definitely say that we make her. And then, in the past, this past year, we had Naomi was an alternate. Never, I contacted her multiple times. Never even responded to me. Paul Morrison also submitted an application, so I know he's highly interested, and he did help with volunteer or same day registration. So he has helped work. Dale Copps also was never available to work. He did respond to me. So again, we can appoint these folks, but they don't often always show up. So take your pick of any of those. I don't know Alexander. I can't read my own handwriting. So it's Withington or Wilmington or something. But anyways, out of all of those, pick 2 more along with Becky. And then you could make the other ones alternates. I would also say James Fickett and Janice Beal. It's not a bad thing to have them on the list. These are folks that I will be using and tapping into for, especially for the primary that's coming up in September, but also for the big election in November, as same-day registrations have been known to be out of control. And so this gives me a good list of people to really tap into to fill in those jobs, and other jobs like monitoring the parking lot, monitoring the line, things that I would also assign to you all. Running and getting food. Those are kind of, I can assign them all over the place. But anyways, that's my recommendation for this list of names. And I don't see, there's no reason to not accept anybody. Tiffany Price is an independent and apparently cannot technically be an inspector of an election. But I have other plans for her, so she'll be around. There you go. That's my input. Do with it what you wish. It's your job.
So, with the recommendation of appointing 6, is there any reason we can't do that? I mean, we have that flexibility, right?
That's what we've normally had. So, I don't know why Elisa made a different recommendation this year. Last year we had 6. And then we had a whole bunch of Democratic alternates.
Okay.
So,
And there's no reason, as long as there's no legal reason we can't do it.
no, so really we have 3. So inspector of elections get to, a lot of times you can use them as ballot clerks. You don't have to. You have to use at least 1 from each party as a ballot clerk. And we have 3 ballot clerk stations. And then I can assign anybody else to that. But, and then they get used for all sorts of different things. So there's nothing that stops the list. The RSA's or the recommendation is to have 1 ballot clerk per 600 voters. I think we have, I'm not sure where, I meant to look up where our checklist is at, but it's good to have, so let's say 3,000 voters, give or take a couple hundred. So it's good to have 6 just for that number. But how they get used and when they get used is a whole different situation. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I would do.
Yeah.
3 of each.
Yeah, no, I know they have to be the same number each. I just want to make sure we're not, that the 2 wasn't a technical reason.
There's nothing like that.
Yeah.
And then they just how they get used and then those numbers. And then it's always nice to have alternates. Again, last year, or not last year, but in 2020 for the presidential, we registered almost 200 people. So it takes a lot of volunteers to help out the supervisors for that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
What's the pleasure of the board? Sounds like on the Republican side, might be Nicole Lovejoy, Francine Lozo, and Shirley Green, with Susan Gibson as an alternate. And on the Democratic side, Becky Powell, Paul Morrison, and maybe Alexander Withington with Naomi Hartov, Dale Copps, James Fickett, and Janice Beal.
Dale Cox, someone who never showed up or something?
That's what she said. Said he wasn't available.
Yeah, he at least responded, but he was never available. But it's okay to keep him on the alternate list,
Yeah. I mean, I would suggest putting anybody who applied or was appointed as alternates because
He actually applied. Although again, sometimes, and I've learned this from other towns, that the parties sometimes nominate people that aren't interested, or have other jobs, so they don't necessarily contact these folks ahead of time. So I need a little bit more robust list to make sure.
Okay. So is there a suggestion or a motion to appoint 6 names that somebody might throw out there, with the remainder being alternates?
You just threw the names out there, didn't you?
Yeah. So what I'm suggesting is Nicole Lovejoy, Francine Lozo, Shirley Green as Republican inspectors, Rebecca Powell, Paul Morrison, and Alexander Withington as Democratic inspectors, and then Kathleen Ducato, Naomi Hartoff, Dale Copps, James Fickett, and Janice Beal as alternates. Oh, and Susan Gibson as alternates.
I so move.
I second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks,
Thank you,
y'all.
Lindsay.
See you in September. It's coming up, September 10th. Put it on your calendars. Bye.
All right. Last item of business, Recreation Commission appointments.
What's happening here?
So we have two applications for the Recreation Commission from Chris, Sweat, I'm gonna say the name wrong, and Rick Sweat as well.
Can I just ask like a general history question? Because I think we've had in the past, like on other boards, there've been two members of the same household, but I don't always think that's great, but in this case, this committee is having a tough time garnering support. It's not like we're putting two people on budget committee. By appointment, so I just didn't know if the town has actually any policy or anything. I just recall there being more than one from the same family, like same household.
Does anyone know these folks?
I do. I know both of them.
So they're both, pretty
They
enthusiastic
volunteer with the
about.
PTA. They are very active with their grandchild. So. You.
In this case, I have no objections based on the household for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, normally I'd
certainly
be
not.
against it, but this seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Do we need to do a motion?
I'll make a motion to appoint Rick Bousquet and Chris Bousquet to Enfield Parks and Recreation.
Second.
Board.
For.
Recreation Commission, I'm sorry,
For,
Enfield Recreation Commission.
and adjustment to the amount, suggested adjustment to the motion, picking end dates for both positions.
Usually let Lisa
Do
do.
you want the 3-year or the, one of them to be the 2-year? I think I suggest 3-year.
I think they both can be for the 3-year
Yeah.
expiring May 1 of 27.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Is there a second to the revision?
That's what
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, welcome, new Recreation Commission members. All right, that ends the business of the evening. There's one administrative item, and it brings us to public comment. Any public comment this evening?
I think it's listed in your administrative items, but I'm glad to see that the issue at Johnston Beach has been reported to DES for violation of the use of vegetation there in what is town property and only a right of way.
Yes.
I don't know what the expected outcome of that will be, but
Yeah, I think at this point, there's not necessarily an expected outcome, but the town's going to just pursue the proper process and try to treat everybody. We treat this town property, so everyone needs to be treated fairly. So, thank you.
I have a comment. I mean, this looks longer than it is, and I will try to make it short because I know everybody is tired, I'm sure. And you just pass those around. I'll get some here. This is something that you might be aware of already. I was, and the police are aware of it. I became aware today, and was quite concerned that there's been some vandalism of area businesses in Enfield. And most specifically, what I was aware of today happened 10 days ago, and 2 days ago was at the Home Place Furniture. There was a rock thrown through their window and twice, so he had to clean it up and not do his business and repair it. And then he repaired it with glass, and because it happened again, he had to, now he put up plexiglass. So from my perspective, you know, I think it's tricky to figure this out, who's doing this. But I'm also thinking about our businesses in Enfield and how we really want them to stay and how
I was just shocked because I know there's vandals, but I just didn't think about that until. And, especially repeat incidents. He pointed out to me that the old laundromat building on the front of it, if you look at the window, big plate glass window that's on the front of the building to the right, where you're gonna go around the corner and walk in the door, the side door, there's 2 bullet holes. And that happened apparently, he said, when they were fixing the building up. So I don't know if that was 6 months ago or a year
A
ago.
long time ago.
But I do know that, it's also costing businesses money. Because he said that, and I don't know if that was when Brian owned it, I know he does now. But he said it hasn't been replaced in part, I'm sure Brian's gonna redo the buildings for the brewery. But also just the cost of $1,000 to replace a plate glass window. And then my awareness, I don't have specific information about this, but that something happened at the new apartment building. And that something happened supposedly up on Route 4. Those are not corroborated, so I don't know. But it just bringing it to your attention, like there again, this is not disparaging the police. I think they have plans, but the fact that this poor gentleman, home his furniture, twice in, the last 10 days. I don't think he's being targeted. I don't know what other solutions can be found. But I'm also concerned thinking going ahead, we really need these businesses to be part of our tax base. And we really want to attract businesses to town. And how can we attract them if they're going to be, their businesses are going to be vandalized? So, I don't have a solution. I don't know that you have a solution. But I'm just bringing it as a concern to the select.
Thank you. And yes, I don't know if it's been in one of our meetings, but certainly I know the laundromat was brought forward at the time, as well. And this is there any general response from down at this point other than police are doing, are working on it?
Yeah, the police.
Yeah.
Could be. I haven't
Yeah.
heard about any of the recent ones.
Yeah.
I'm sure the police have, but I will double check with them tomorrow.
Yeah.
See what we're doing, but besides little more patrols downtown.
Yeah, like I know the laundromat one, certainly Roy was involved with that when it happened.
Yeah.
But, yeah, thank you. Yeah, because you're absolutely correct.
I think most businesses, when they're citing now, are putting in cameras for themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I realize that for older businesses, it's not something you necessarily go back and do, but if you go up and you look, I'm just gonna pick on Pellerants because they've done so much work recently, you'll see there's cameras there everywhere.
Yeah.
We have cameras on our business.
Yeah, the Sharon does make a good point, like we should be doing whatever we can to create an environment where that's hopefully not required.
You mean like where we don't tip over porta potties and throw diapers down?
Correct.
Yes, I completely agree. I completely agree. I don't know what people.
All right.
Totally unacceptable.
Any other public comments? No? All right, any other business for the board this evening?
Motion to adjourn.
No, that's two. You're allowed to second it.
Second.
Okay.
Whoa,
Any discussion?
late on that clock.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all for coming out and your
Thank you.
comments tonight.
Nothing to
Appreciate it.
sign?
I must forgot my
Well, there's at least one thing I have to say.
Say, once again, you guys